People wonder, why is it that in various places around the world we are commemorating an event from 100 years ago? Why are we making this effort? I can share with you when I left the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on October 16th of last year, and I walked back into the Jerusalem Center. The first thing I learned about was that there was a conference that was being held on October 25th in the British House of Lords. And it was a conference that was actually run by an organization called the Palestinian Return Center. Now, you might think that they are completely absorbed with the question of what the Palestinian politicians call the right of return. This organization has a lot more to do with it. In any case, they received a side room in the House of Lords, and they dedicated themselves to an idea, which also sounded particularly strange to anybody who was wondering what's with all this 100 years since the Balfour Declaration. They inaugurated what they call the Balfour Apology Campaign. And as there they were in the House of Lords of Great Britain, insisting that the British government apologize 100 years later for the Balfour Declaration. Now, this organization, the Palestinian Return Center, the PRC, actually has an illustrious history for those who follow the issues of terrorism. The Palestinian Return Center is closely affiliated with Hamas. And I can say that on December 27th, 2010, the Palestinian Return Center was determined by our defense minister, Ehud Barak, to be an international terrorist organization. It didn't just hold conferences around Europe calling for the destruction of Israel, which of course it did in places like the Netherlands, in London, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Germany, Austria. They got to Durban too. They were very active there back when the Durban conference was held. But they also were active, for example, in the Mavi Marmara affair, the Turkish flotilla. So here you have an organization completely identified with Hamas, financially, manpower-wise, requesting that the British government apologize for the Balfour Declaration, and getting prime real estate, the House of Commons, House of Lords, in order to make this statement. I spoke with a number of British friends of mine, and we arranged on the 29th of November, a good date to pick, to give our retaliatory salvo. In other words, to come to London and to respond to what they were saying. We supplied some information. A few of us from the Jerusalem Center were there. But the best response, I must say that Andrew Roberts, where are you, was with us. The best response really came from the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Theresa May. She appeared on December 12th in London at an event of Conservative Friends of Israel and related to this very issue. After 100 years, what should be Britain's stance on the Balfour Declaration? I have to say there was a gentleman in the Foreign Office who gave a kind of what we would call parve answer to this question. It wasn't particularly strong. It was something to the effect that we're not going to celebrate, but we're not going to apologize either. Theresa May, in her statement on December 12th, said that the Balfour Declaration was one of the most important letters in history. And then she took a step further. she said, "It is an anniversary we will be marking with pride." In other words, she did not allow herself or the British government to be intimidated by this campaign. But the very fact that a campaign was being waged showed us how important and how relevant the Balfour Declaration was to this very day. Israel has been in a multi-front war for its survival since it was created in 1948. That's involved a military campaign. It's involved a diplomatic campaign at places like the United Nations. But it's also involved what I would call a war of ideas that's being waged against it. The organizations waging that campaign are part of what some of us who have studied the politics of Great Britain call the Green-Red Alliance, alliance between the far left and Islamist organizations. Now, this effort, this campaign is something that we can't ignore. And I think the reasons for this campaign is that because organizations like Hamas have launched rockets on the state of Israel, on our civilian cities, because they have tried to break our will using military means and have failed, they will increasingly put efforts into the war of ideas. Whether it's getting Israeli soldiers arrested when they walk on British soil, or whether it's trashing the Balfour Declaration. And therefore, it is a provocation, it is an effort that we can't be quiet about. We have to understand what was the Balfour Declaration, what was its historical significance. It is the first step in the legitimization of Jewish political revival. And the others who will speak today will speak about how it was used in the mandate and how it became binding international law, et cetera, et cetera. But those who want to undermine the legitimacy of the state of Israel, those who want to wage the war of ideas against our very existence, have to begin with an attack on the Balfour Declaration. And therefore, this is not a conference to be attended by those who are interested in obscure moments in history. This is a conference that is dealing with a current struggle that is very much alive. And if the same adversaries who are trying to physically damage the people of Israel are trying to damage the reputation of the Balfour Declaration, then that's a wake-up call. So I'm very glad that Konrad Adenauer Stiftung has joined us in producing this conference. Because only by defeating those who don't recognize your very existence, only by defeating those who want to cause you harm, can you move to a new level, which is the level the international community is hoping for. That's a level of diplomacy and peacemaking. But right now, if the document, if the letter that was responsible for our very existence is questioned, not just questioned, but is challenged, then we have a responsibility to give a response. And that's what we're doing here. I want to thank Ahuva Volk and Chai Hershkovitz, who put in the effort to make this conference occur. I came in from the Foreign Ministry into the Jerusalem Center, and most of the work was done. So I really appreciate what they've done, and we can see by the attendance and the participation of the speakers how the commitment that they made. So let us begin the first session of the conference, and let us remember that we're not dealing with an obscure point in history, but in something that is very relevant to the war to delegitimize the state of Israel today.